There's a lot of butter in this book.
One of the best books I've read all year. This is a Western. It's a spicy romance. It's historical fiction. It's fat activist literature. It's a lesbian love story. It's a comic masterpiece.
And it has like 4 reviews on Goodreads.
This is Martha Moody by Susan Stinson. It was originally published in 1995 by Spinsters Inc., and it was reissued by Small Beer Press in 2020. The setting is a recently settled town in the old American West. Our narrator is Amanda Linger, a lonely homesteader. Amanda is in an unhappy marriage with a man named John, and she has 2 friends. One is a woman named Claire who lives on a nearby farm, and the other is Amanda's cow, Miss Alice, who is perhaps my new favorite animal in all of literature. Amanda spends most of her limited free time, which is mostly late at night when John is asleep, copying verses from the Bible and kind of daydreaming about the mythical characters that she's encountering in the stories in the Bible. And early on in the novel, she meets runs into the town's founder and the owner of the general store, a woman named Martha Moody, and Amanda finds herself falling in love with Martha, and they kind of tumble into this clandestine relationship. And as the novel goes along, Amanda starts writing stories about Martha in her free time, secretly hiding them away from John. And in the stories, Martha becomes this mythical hero, kind of in the line of Paul Bunyan. And Miss Alice the cow becomes a winged cow who, and they go on all sorts of fabulous adventures together. And so the story becomes not just this love story about Martha and Amanda, but also about the growth and creation of Amanda as an artist and a writer. And it's also about this community they live in, and Amanda's and Martha's search for acceptance, both self-acceptance and acceptance within this community. And it's absolutely stunning. It's beautifully written. It's a lot of fun. It's sad, truly wonderful novel, and I'm shocked that it doesn't have a wider audience. The novel is a lush and beautiful contribution to the body positivity and fat activism movements, and I want to make sure I use the author's own words here to describe her work in this novel. So here's a quote from Susan Stinson from an interview on Lambda Literary's website. So Stinson says, this is an interview that happened after the reissue of the novel in 2020. So it's been a good 25 years or so, several decades since Stinson has written the novel. But reflecting upon it, she says, I set myself the task of writing a romantic relationship between 2 fat women who revel in each other's bodies. There is butter and imagery throughout the story that works as an image of physical sensuality and as an image of creativity. I think I was influenced in that by the image from Audre Lorde's magnificent essay, The Uses of the Erotic as Power, of massaging a pellet of gold dye into margarine during the wartime rationing. If I wanted to write about fat women, which I very much did, I needed to strongly evoke fat bodies in ways that might allow readers to shake off cultural stereotypes long enough to imagine their pleasures. Our pleasure, mine. So I want to read the first few sentences, the first 2 paragraphs to you. They're short, 4 sentences. Chapter 1. I was crouched next to the creek, baiting my hook with a hunk of fat when I heard a rustling on the bank upstream. I turned my head and saw Martha Moody looking into the water. She was a heavy woman bound up with dry and perishable goods, the owner of Moody's general store. Her red hair was pulled into a bun, and she wore a black dress with jet buttons that reflected light. So I want to include also a list of words that came to mind when I was finished with the novel. I just sat down and jotted down every word and image and theme that came to mind right after I finished that last word and last page. I wrote, the first thing I wrote was, this book is amazing. All right, butter, number one, butter, strong women, myth making in all sorts of ways. So we have the myth making, Amanda creating Martha into a myth. And so that's a huge theme throughout, but also the myths found within the Bible and other stories that are shared around this community. The myth that Miss Alice kind of is turned into a myth, a mythical hero. But then you also have the myth of the West and the American West and this myth-making process that is so much a part of the idea of the American West and of America in general. Independence and freedom, both Martha and Amanda seeking what independence and freedom means to them. Community, it ends up being a really strong and beautiful community that's written. Stinson writes it so well. It's got its dark side, but also its beautiful, supportive side as well. Acceptance, self-love, body positivity, lust, love, friendship. I think the friendship between Amanda and Claire, I kept I guess maybe a little bit of a spoiler, I kept waiting for it to turn bad, like this relationship between these two women. I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And I guess maybe that says something about me or says something about the way female friendships are depicted in literature, that I was waiting for that moment. But the friendship between Amanda and Claire is so beautiful. Food. The food in this book is so wonderful. It made me want to go make baked beans and chocolate cake and biscuits, and I think food and community are a huge theme. You know, the food that brings people together. There's the chocolate cake that Claire brings over when in moments of grief. Censorship is a big theme here, as well as self-expression and storytelling in general. Also appropriation, who gets to tell whose story. Legends, reality versus the story. How are stories manipulating reality? What is reality really? Other than a collection of stories we tell ourselves. Destruction and resurrection, survival, public versus private, bodies, fat activism, fat positivity, water. There's a lot of water imagery here. There's a stream that they visit quite often, but also this theme of like washed and clean versus unwashed and dirty, and what that means for a person on their own and a person within society. Then along those same lines, expectations and control. So those were all the words that I thought of as I was reading this, or after I was reading this amazing book. Keep shaking. All right, further reading. So there are a few interviews in which Susan Stinson refers to the work of Audre Lorde, so that might be a place to turn. Both poetry and prose of Audre Lorde might be a good place to turn after reading Martha Moody. But it also brought to mind to me a book called The Hearts of Horses by Molly Gloss, at least with the themes of community and the kind of rural farm American West setting, but then also one of the main female characters taking on a job that in our minds and our stories is often a man who is in that job. So in The Hearts of Horses, it's a character who becomes a horse trainer, and she becomes very well employed because all of the young men who would normally be doing that are actually off in Europe fighting in World War I. And so one of the main female characters is able to take on this role. And in Martha Moody, it's, I would say, both Martha Moody, who is the owner of this general store, but then Amanda, as she explores her craft of writing as well as a woman in this time and place in the U.S. But then also what comes to mind is The Adventures of China Iron by Gabriela Cabazon Camara. This came to mind in the similarity of the harsh but beautifully described landscape. But it's also a love story between two women, and it's told in first person by a female narrator who kind of looks up in awe to this other woman that she's in love with and kind of creates a sort of a myth out of a mythical hero out of the woman that she loves. And both narrators lead kind of a harsh life with a harsh marriage and are seeking to escape that through both venturing out, in the case of China Iron, she's literally going on a journey. And in the case of Amanda Linger, she is seeking escape through her writing. But they're also strikingly similar in their themes of the myth-making process on the frontier of a nation that is in the process of building itself. So that also comes to mind as further reading or connected reading after Martha Moody. So more to come from Small Beer Press later this month, and then next up I have Milkweed Editions as my next independent press that I'll be reading from. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. And I'm gonna go read a book and eat some butter and maybe some biscuits, and I hope you do something similarly fabulous. See ya.